much testosterone is flowing through your body right now? Too much. Too much. Look at my fucking... Look at my hairline. I want like... When you think about it, when you really, really think about it, going balding from when you're 20 is just a sign that you're like, you just have too high of a testosterone count. It's just because I'm too alpha. Vladimir buff. Vladimir is going to draining health for every other ally. Is that only his leveled up form? So he drains health instead of damaging. Shen has 3 attack. Okay. Shen goes +3. What the hell is this music? This is weird music, guys. Hecarim buff. Hecarim gets 1 point of attack. Alright. Standalone is 4 mana. So they're nerfing Standalone to 4 mana. And whoever put this video up thought the best way to visualize this, the best way to show us this, was someone playing a Badger Bear on turn... Wait, it is turn 4. Wait, it's turn 4 in this demo. They fucked it up. It's supposed to be turn 3. They could have played it on turn 4. It's just they used the 1 mana. And Bear is 3/4. Rear guard, wow, they're showing everything. Rear guard is a 3/1, and Boom Crew is a 1/3. That's the big burn nerfs. That's huge. That's a gigantic nerf to burn. Aggro nerfs. Yeah, both across the board. All right. I like this format. This is kind of like, it's to the point. Oh, whoa, that's kind of immersion breaking. Ooh, oh, this is holy shit. Oh, the Teemo one. The Teemo one is good. The Ezreal one, I think the Ezreal one is good. That's like a Monka. I think, we don't know the animation for this, but I think this Ezreal one is going to end up high tier. I don't like Elise. That might be a hot take. We will see. I suspect that Elise is going to be weak. But I really like Teemo and Ezreal. Mostly Ezreal. I think Ezreal's the strongest thing. You guys have to understand, the emote game is all about subtlety. It's all about subtlety. And I know everything in life is about subtlety, but emotes particularly so. Like, particularly so. Things like Elise, you know, are kind of like Tryndamere or kind of like Yasuo, where they're not subtle enough. And without subtlety, you lose the ability to be properly versatile. Okay, so I'm gonna go through. We're gonna do 2 waves. I'm gonna go through real quick, card by card, give like a one-liner opinion, and then I'm gonna come back later and be more thorough about it. Okay, but I wanna give you guys kind of like a sort of first impressions and then like more thorough analysis after that. So we're gonna start with first impressions. So Vlad is getting basically the drain effect instead of the deal 1. So basically he's healing your Nexus for free. Instead of doing what he did before, he's also healing your Nexus for free. This is a notable buff. I suspect this is not significant enough for Vlad to be great, but it is more flavorful. I do like the buff, and there's actually a chance that Vlad's going to be okay. Karma. Karma goes to 6 mana. So this is a change that I've kind of been thinking about for a while. I think that the best way to nerf Karma is something that's number-wise and not fundamental to her concept. I think that's a hot take. Most people think that she needs to be reworked entirely. 6 mana is going to leave this card still fairly powerful, although I think this will be a more noticeable nerf than it might immediately seem. In high-level play, a lot of the value of Karma is like, in a lot of matchups, your opponent can't tap below a certain mana point because you threaten to play Karma. If you have 5 mana up, then they can't go below, you know, Grasp mana, because then you'll play Karma without a response, right? And her being at 6 mana will really, really hinder that form of play. And even though you play her on 10, usually it's in a situation where mana is important for you. I think the 1 mana will actually be felt on this card. She will still be fairly powerful. Shen gets 1 point of attack. Okay, that's interesting. Well, that's a pretty big deal. Shen is a support. He is often going to be attacking. The difference between 2 and 3 attack is really big on these turns. And most importantly, so for those of you guys who are new to the game, you might not know that Shen was actually like fairly competitive for a while. There were kind of 2 different points in time where Shen was like flavor of the week. It was like, there's 3 different decks. You could run like an Ionia Demacia, like mid-value concept with barriers. You could run a Bannerman with a Shen Caretaker Splash, or you could run like a Shen Lux fairly spell-based concept. Each of these 3 decks has been like pretty competitive for, at the very least, a point in time. Not very long. They didn't last super long, but they were like the cool thing to do for a bit. Shen wasn't, he's not as bad as probably he might seem. The biggest thing for Shen is like Demacia other cards are getting nerfed, as we saw. So what that's going to mean is like there will actually be experimentation with that like archetype again. I don't think this is terrible. A lot of people are going to say Shen is still poo-poo. I don't have high expectations for him. He'll probably be better than Vlad. He might actually end up all right. Vi loses 1 health. It's pretty big. Overall, she's kind of like in the same realm of Karma where it's a nerf you will feel, but this is she will still be a fairly powerful card. You will still see Vi seeing play for sure, but with Tough, a 1 health reduction is a big deal. Like this is very deserved. This is a very big deal. There's so many situations where Vi will come down at 5 health with Tough, and you will have to sink 3 damage instances to kill her, which is ridiculous. But now she'll pretty much demand 2 in a lot of cases. That's a really big deal. She will still be powerful. She will still be on the competitive level, but she will probably, you won't go as far out of your, like Bannerman decks were like cutting Garen to just put Vi in. That was silly. We're probably not going to see that anymore. So Hecarim's power gets +1. So he's a 5/5. So Hecarim in the past has been a 4/6 before he got nerfed to a 4/5, and now they're making him a 5/5. Overall, I think Ephemeral probably needs more help than this. This is something that, like, so we're seeing 3 champions underplayed getting buffed: Vlad, Hecarim, and Shen. I would say out of the 3 of those, Shen has the most potential in his new form. Hecarim and Vlad, I don't have super high expectations for, but they are possibilities. I don't think it's going to be great. Greatthorn Companion gets 5 power. Ranger nerf. So Greatthorn Companion, you still can't run this card in your main deck. Like, there's no way. It's Demacia, it's 5, it's competing for Radiant Guardian, Silverwing Lancer, and Garen. There's no Demacia deck in existence that can run all 3 of those cards, let alone fitting in this 4th one. This could be powerful. You can gimmick it out with Ghost. In reality, this is a Remembrance buff. There will be board states where you'll high roll this off of Remembrance on the 25%. Well, I say high roll, but Remembrance often is going to have better options. You'll hit it off the 25, and maybe you'll be able to put some pressure in with the last point of attack. In reality, this isn't a Greatthorn buff, it's a Remembrance buff. You might say that buffing Karma Lux, which is very arguably the strongest deck in the game already, is a bad idea. Karma Lux is getting like at least 3 different nerfs that we've seen so far, so I don't think this is a problem. It's probably not going to change almost anything. Grizzled Ranger goes to 3 power, and Badger Bear, as we already saw, also goes to 3 power. So Badger Bear is now a 3 mana 3/4, and Ranger is now a 4 mana 3/1 that summons the 3/4 instead. So these buffs, or sorry, these nerfs, I think are extremely warranted. I think from what I see so far, I don't think anything is getting over nerfed. Every time you talk about balance changes, there's always going to be the contrarians that are going to say, oh, Burn doesn't need to get nerfed, it's keeping the meta in check. Or they're going to say, oh, this thing got over nerfed, it was sort of healthy for the meta. I think that's an attribution to a couple of things. I think most primarily just a form of Stockholm syndrome, straight up. I honestly don't know where those kinds of line of reasonings come from. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Anyway, Grizzled Ranger and Badger Bear I think are getting extremely warranted nerfs. Demacia is still going to be a strong region. It's Demacia. It'll never go away. I don't think Burn is getting over nerfed either based on the 2 changes we've seen so far, but I'll talk about that at the moments. I'm a big fan of all these changes so far. I think that I like the sort of light-handed Karma nerf. I'm a huge fan of all these changes. I mean, there's some of them that won't do anything, like Greatthorn Companion, but this is very much in line with what I would like. Like, Vi losing 1 health, that's fine. I would prefer, by the way, to have seen a redesign to Vi, but this is initial impressions. We'll talk about that later. I don't like her concept. I don't like the idea of an inherent value champion that you don't really play to flip, and instead you just play it as a dude. I don't like that, but we'll get more into the design concept of that later. Overall, I love these changes so far. Grizzled Ranger is probably still going to be a semi-competitive card. Something that a lot of people don't talk about with Grizzled Ranger in terms of why it's so powerful is because it exists as a 4-mana card in a game where, well, I mean, in Demacia, there's kind of no good 4-mana cards, let alone except for Bannerman, which of course, A, often you're not playing on turn 4, and B, that was a large part of the reason why Bannerman was so good to begin with a while ago, just because, again, we exist in a meta state where there's very few 4-mana cards, like, at all. Grizzled Ranger is a card that not only came down as a hyper-powerful auto-include body that was just ridiculous in terms of value, but it fulfilled the extremely rare 4-mana slot, and in Demacia, that's actually the only slot, when you really think about it, that's the only slot it could have possibly been in. When you look at Demacia, like an OP 3-mana card, yeah, Badger Bear hits, but it's replacing Protege. Protege is good. This card, like at 5 mana, can't compete with 5-mana cards. Grizzled Ranger existing as a 4-mana Demacia card to fulfill the needs of their curve, while just being like super powerful otherwise, is nuts. Like, this is a really good card. I really like Grizzled Ranger. Well, I say I like it. I like it from like a stock standpoint. It's like, It's nuts. I don't like the concept of Grizzled Ranger, but because it's still fulfilling the 4-mana niche, I think this will still, hilariously enough, it's getting a nerf to 1 power, which is redoubled because its scout concept makes that attack like kind of doubled, and then it sort of tripled because the Badger Bear comes out at 1 power as well. This will still be a competitive card, I think, and the reason for that is just because mostly the Demacia 4-mana slot is A, really important, and B, really uncontested. So I expect Ranger to still be a competitive, viable card. We saw Badger Bear, so I'll skip to that. It's a 3-mana 3/4 now instead of a 4/4. I think this is the best change for it. I think this is what it should have been printed at to begin with. When we originally all saw this card, we all didn't believe this card was real. We thought it was a misprint. We looked at the gem and we were like, there's no way they actually printed a 3-mana 4/4. That wouldn't make sense. A 3-mana 3/4 would have been competitive in this game at multiple times in multiple metas in the past, and they went ahead and just skipped that step and went straight to 4/4. Everyone was in disbelief. In reality, this card should have always been a 3/4. A 3/4 is a perfectly competitive card. I'm glad they didn't make it a 4/3. I saw a lot of suggestions saying they should have made it a 4/3. I think that would have been completely inviable. We've seen a lot of 4/3s in the past that just wouldn't make sense. At a 3/4, now this is very interesting because Laurent Protege is a 3-mana 2/4. So now Demacia players will have to think, okay, would I rather have the Challenger at 2 attack or the 3 attack unit and the 4 health stat line, right? Because they're both the same thing. It's just Badger Bear is going to be a 3/4 and Protege is going to be a 2/4 with a Challenger keyword. That's a difficult question. I think it will be flexible. I think it will depend a little bit on the needs of the meta at the time. I think it will be very close, but I would actually often go with Protege. At this point in time, Protege is looking like it will start fitting back into decks. It makes you think. It's a decision point that you will actually have to think about now. Anyway, I skipped Chevalier, so let's go to Chevalier. So it's a 4-mana 3/2. Overall, I kind of wanted to like this card in the base set. It was actually almost on the level. I feel like it got a little bit power crept. I'm not like a huge fan of its position in the meta right now. I don't think 1 health is going to be enough to see this card like seeing like any sort of competitive play. It will make it a better Expedition card, and Demacia is already good in Expedition, but it's the epic gem, so you're not really priced in to have this card in Expedition anyway. Overall, I think this is like a pretty nothing change. I don't think this is going to affect the meta basically at all, but this card is all right. It's definitely underrated. Like, you could definitely mess around with this card like sometimes, right? Okay, standalone goes to 4 mana. Absolute garbage. This card is dead, no longer exists, deleted from the game entirely. Nothing more to say about that. Legion Rearguard goes to 1 health. Huge nerf, gigantic nerf, absolutely massive nerf. It's hard to explain how big of a nerf this is. This card went from the best 1-drop in Noxus to the worst 1-drop in Noxus. Like, you have to understand, this card is now a worse Saboteur, right? That's crazy. That's absolutely nuts. And by the way, I think this change is warranted. I want to talk a little bit about the design identity of Runeterra and especially aggro's place in Runeterra. I think that Runeterra is a game where the devs very intentionally don't want traditional forms of aggro to exist as a concept. That's going to seem weird for people that don't come from Hearthstone or Magic, but in those games, the idea of aggro has always been like extremely just stick it in super aggressively, like RDW kind of stuff. The game's over on like turn 4, like real fucking aggro. Like, Runeterra has never really had real aggro until pretty much now with Burn, which, yeah, Burn is kind of like RDW for Magic. It's just like stick it in, it's competitive, it exists as a tier 1 concept, and it kills you fast, reliably, right? I think Runeterra devs have very intentionally shown that they don't want that concept to exist in this game. They don't want that level of just speed and deniability to exist, because you have to understand that is what aggro is. It is denial. It is not, I'm going to counter your strategy. It is, I'm not going to let you get to your strategy, but it's still a form of denial, and it's still, in my opinion, I like this. I like this design angle, by the way. I really do like this. I think that is kind of like a flaw in Magic. And don't get me wrong, there is the meta standpoint. Yes, to a degree, fast decks do need to exist, for sure. And to a degree, it's like, it helps, you know, keep the meta in balance, but everything needs to, it all comes down to balance, right? Like, the idea of decks that close out super quick and super aggressively create, I think, fairly unhealthy scenarios in the meta environment, largely rock, paper, scissors. This card dies to every 1-drop. It dies to Hapless. It can't attack against Hapless. Dies to Vile Feast, dies to Whale, dies to Shock, dies to anything. It can't attack. You play it on turn 1, your opponents play Hapless, you lose. It's literally a worse Saboteur. This card is gutted. And by the way, I think that is a good thing. Kindly Tavern Keeper goes to 3. Whoa! Whew, this is a card that is actually like almost on the level. It really is. Like a 3/3/3 that heals an ally or your Nexus 3 is actually something you could play. Now, this card has 2 problems. A, Burn just got nerfed. So that's part of the reason you might want this concept. Burn is no longer a tier 1 deck. I suspect, by the way, that Burn, there will be some aggro deck in tier 2. It might be Burn, it might not be. But healing is something you kind of want more against aggro, or sorry, than burn than aggro. Because against aggro, you can just defend, but against burn, you have to heal, right? And this card has seen niche play in the past. Prismat popularized it in like the Ezreal Freljord deck back in the day, and it actually hit a lot of those decks. I love it as an addition in those decks back in the day. That was a long time ago. Like Mogwai bought it to the Twitch Rivals tournament. I think that Tavern Keeper is actually a card that has been like playable in the past. It's getting a big buff. Now here's the problem with this card. Problem number 2, it's in Freljord. That's it. That's kind of all I need to say about this card. We can go next. That's it. Sorry, kindly Tavern Keeper. Okay, Deep Meditation. So it's going from 4 to 5, which means it'll cost 3 mana if its condition is met. This is a really big nerf. This is a pretty crazy nerf, actually. Wow. It's necessary. This is a warranted nerf, I think. I like this nerf. I would have done probably the same exact thing. I like these changes overall. I want to make that clear. I'm a pretty big fan of these changes. There have been about 2 Runeterra patches where I have looked at the balance changes and been like, kind of like cocking my head. Overall, I tend to really like Runeterra's like balance and design changes. I really like this one so far. I've agreed with almost all of these, by the way. Almost all of these. I think this is necessary. This card was busted. This card was actually like meta warpingly busted. This card was kind of unfair. Plus mana and minus mana are going to be different degrees of nerfs or buffs on different styles of cards. And that's really important to understand. There's some cards that can receive plus mana nerfs and they can be completely garbage right away. An old example would be Rasa. If you play this game from the start, you'll have noticed that Rasa was like the strongest card in the game, arguably. Ridiculous. At 7 mana, they nerf him to 8 and he's immediately just never seen again, basically. I mean, I slide him into like they who endure as a 1-of, but it's like, yeah, you don't see that again. And that's because the timing of that card is really important at that junction, right? You're trying to leverage 2 resources with a similar rate, right? And those are cards and mana. You draw a card every turn and you gain mana every turn. And the draw is 1 per turn for the entire game based on, natural draws. And then you've got conditional draws like cards like Deep Meditation. But your mana is a scaling resource. So the entire game becomes sort of a math puzzle of juggling those 2 resources along the game. And from that, we emerge like, mana curves and stuff like that. So the cards that draw you other cards are more mana reliant than normally would be, right? So what that means is a card like Deep Meditation puts you in a situation where you need mana, no matter what. Every time you use Deep Meditation, because it's drawing you cards, it's going to demand mana, because you need mana to use those cards, right? So when you're looking at like specific mana nerfs to specific cards, this is the kind of card that the +1 mana will significantly hurt. Boomker Rookie goes to 3 health. Exactly the change I would have made. Some people were proposing 0 attack. I don't like that, honestly, mostly for sort of like, it comes down to psychology, which is, not, I think often how suggestions are made, but yeah, it's very important nonetheless. So it's got 3 health now. Huge change at 4 health coming out on turn 2. It basically was always, it's sort of like Vi, where that 1 point of health will almost always change the amount of hits it needs to take. Like Boomker Rookie at 4 health, coming out on turn 2, it always took exactly 2 hits to kill it. At 3 health, about half the time it'll die in 1 hit, right? That's really, really important. So it's a really gigantic nerf, gets cleaned up really hard by stuff like, stuff like Fiora and other challenges, other deal 3s. This is a really big nerf. I think it's pretty warranted. Bird Awakening goes to 6. Wow. God, I think this is the first one I probably disagree with. Yeah, I think I tend to not like this change. So overall, there's a few decks that used Brood Awakening. It wasn't really run in Spider aggro. I mean, you'll see it in the starter decks. You'll see it in They Who Endure, which is kind of like a tier 2 deck at very best. And you saw it in Karina, which has been somewhat of a powerful deck in the past. I don't think it's necessary. I wouldn't call Karina oppressive. And B, it also got nerfed a bit with Vi. And C, there was probably a better way to nerf Karina. I don't think I like Brood Awakening going to 6 mana. I agreed with all the other changes, but I think this was kind of unnecessary. Longtooth. So this affects both Chum the Waters and Fizz's Chum the Waters, and it gets 1 point of health. So Chum the Waters is still a bad card. You're not going to play Chum the Waters. But what this is a buff to Fizz, because Fizz gives you this card sometimes randomly. I like this change. This is, I think this is an example of a great change that really understands game design. I think a lot of people looking at this page will be like, this is a weird change. It doesn't make sense. It's not really going to affect anything. In reality, you have to understand what this change is a way to kind of like buff Fizz. You're kind of buffing Chum the Waters, which is nice because like a lot of like new players or budget players will end up messing around with that card. That, you know, that is important, of course. But you're also buffing Fizz. And you're buffing Fizz in kind of the one way you could possibly buff Fizz without making him OP. Like, think about it like that. Fizz is a cool card. He's just under playability, really close. And any other possible way of buffing him would have made him OP and toxic. I think this is neat. It's like it's a tiny subtle change, makes Fizz feel a little bit less bad in terms of his payoff. It's pretty much not going to affect it very much, but it's a nice, like, very minor shift. Okay. Monkey Idol goes from 4 health to 5. Whoa. Oh, God. Oh, Jesus. Oh, God. Is this viable? Oh, no. Okay, so there's two things about this I immediately like. Two things about this. I like this change. I really do. It makes it more interactable because the opponent has more ways of dealing 1 damage than dealing 2. So in theory, any way of dealing it 1 damage would deny you a Powder Monkey. That's good. And B, so obviously it summons a 3rd monkey, right? That's the idea, because it'll survive 2 of its own hits. But B, probably most importantly, what I really like about this is that it makes it more nuanced as a card, which is to say, because it summons an odd number of monkeys and not an even number of monkeys, suddenly it matters which turn you play it on, which it kind of didn't before. Before, it was like you play it on a turn, you get 1 monkey on offense and 1 monkey on defense. Now, there's a dichotomy. Now, you play it on offense, it'll start triggering on defense. If you play it on an offensive turn, you'll get 2 defense monkeys and 1 offensive monkey. If you play it on a defensive turn, you get 2 offensive monkeys and 1 defensive monkey. That's really cool. That's really cool. I really like that. This is a great change overall. Yeah, I'm happy with this. Now, will I think this card is going to be competitive? Technically, that's a sentence. That's a sentence. That made sense. Anyway, will I think this card is going to be competitive? No. No, I won't think that. But it's adorable. It is a cute card. Slopbot. +1/+1. Oh, Jesus. Oh, Christ. Oh, God. Oh, really, though? Wait, hang on. Is this for real? Okay, so this card could actually be decent all of a sudden. That's a huge buff. It's getting 2 stats, and one of those stats is health. That's a pretty enormous buff. That's crazy. There's 2 problems with Slopbot. 1, when you play him on the board and he dies before he can go off, then he's terrible value. 2, this is really, and of course the 4 health protects him from that. A lot. 4 health on turn 3 is like much harder to kill. But sometimes he'll just kill himself. Ignore that. Anyway, 2. Very important, 2. This is something that a lot of people probably aren't thinking of. The other weakness of Slopbot is that this is a fundamentally slow card. So a really important thing is burn is getting nerfed. That's really, really important. Because not only is this card bricked if he dies, he's bricked if you die. Because the thing is, you have this thing called Nexus Health, and when your Nexus Health is 0, you don't get to play the video game anymore. And that's the problem with burn. It stops people from playing the video game, right? And people probably want to play the video game. That's why they download the video game, and that's why they're playing the video game. It's because they want to play the video game. And Slopbot now allows you to play the video game without, like, your health, you're not just going to be at, like, 0 health on turn 5. It displays all the traits of a fundamentally non-competitive card, which is it's somewhat random, it's slow, it requires a bit of a build around, and, okay, that 3 reasons is enough. It has all the traits of a kind of non-competitive card, and that's, by the way, all of this is kind of why Monkey Idol is bad. Slopbot, I feel, actually has a chance. Watchlist. I think talking about the watchlist is really important, by the way. I will actually include it, like, in my overview, just because the watchlist kind of talks about future changes. What you guys need to understand is basically everything that's ever appeared on a Legends of Runeterra watchlist has been nerfed eventually. So what the watchlist kind of says, what it sort of communicates to the player base and from the developers is, we're pretty much going to nerf this card. We're not going to do it this update. We're going to figure out the best way to nerf it, which could be a specific change directly to the card itself, which there's tons of options for, but it could also be an indirect change, like a nerf to the archetype, a nerf to something that's encapsulated within the card, or an indirect nerf to the card by, like, for example, something like power creep. Like, for example, Shadow Assassin was on our watch list and it didn't get directly nerfed, but there's less Shadow Assassins in the meta. There's decks that are straight up cutting it. Most Karma Ezreal decks are straight up cutting Shadow Assassin, which would have been unthinkable before, but the opportunity cost of Shadow Assassin has risen because there's more draw and there's more things you might want to play in turn 3, and there's less demand for elusive. So overall, like, that is a card that has gotten nerfed. So the watch list is basically nerfs that are going to happen. Like, every single card they have ever put on the watch list has gotten nerfed in the next following 2 updates, right? So Unyielding Spirit. I think, by the way, I agree with this. I think Unyielding Spirit is somewhat of a problem card. I don't want this effect to go away, and I would be shocked. I would actually be shocked if they deleted this concept from the game. They will probably keep this concept in the game. They will adjust its cast speed or increase its mana cost. I think, personally, I like the idea of adjusting its cast speed, which could be not only fast but slow if they want to make it something like kind of like Dawn and Dusk or something like that. I think some minor tweak needs to change to this. But by the way, if they adjust its cast speed, that means they can lower its mana point. Like, they could make it like a 6 or 7 mana card if it was slow, or maybe that's a little too much. But the point is, it doesn't have to be an 8 mana card if it's like something like slow. Anyway, doesn't matter. Pilfered Good and card stealing. But by the way, I want to point out, those aren't the only possible nerfs. Again, cards can be nerfed indirectly. Maybe they decide that Fiora is more of a problem. I wouldn't agree with that in this particular case, but there are arguments, and the point is that direct nerfs don't need to happen directly, right? I should phrase that better. Pilfered Goods and card stealing. This one's actually kind of surprising. I saw in Panda's like Reddit poll that a lot of people were saying that the Pilfered Goods and card stealing package should change. Like, a lot of people felt it was kind of like anti-fun or frustrating or overpowered in some way. I've kind of never had that impression. I don't know. I guess that's probably weird to say because I'm the one who like plays the archetype and sort of circle jerks the package. So for the most part, again, I think that... So there's a few different ways to evaluate it. There are arguments that Pilfered Good creates like anti-fun or frustrating scenarios. I think that a lot of people feel that way, and I think that those feelings aren't fake. It is impossible for feelings to be fake in game design. So game design is psychology. If you are feeling negative, that is representative of a flaw in some way. Now, not all flaws have clean solutions, but there's no fake feelings in game design, right? So a lot of people don't like the feel of Pilfered Goods and card stealing, and that is true. I get. I mean, that's important to respect. I think that, again, part of this argument, I think, does come down from the vacuum approach of design, which I am not a fan of. I think a lot of people don't like these cards because they look at the individual constituent cards, those being Black Market Merchant and Pilfered Goods, namely those two, not the others kind of are shit. It doesn't matter. And they look at the cards and they're like, wow, a 2 mana draw 2, that's OP. Or a 2 mana draw 1 that discounts, that's OP. In reality, a card is more than itself. It represents its decks, it represents its archetype, it represents its play patterns. Play patterns are important too. And the thing is, like, if they want to nerf these cards, they should do a fairly light nerf. But also, they would have to buff Bilgewater at the same time. It's sort of like Boom Karuki before the update, which was like, it was kind of keeping an archetype alive. Right now, Pilfered Goods and Black Market Merchant are having a very good impact on the meta diversity. Like actually almost the best possible. Like, there's very few cards that have as much impact, positive impact on meta diversity than Pilfered Goods and Black Market Merchant, right? Which means, what that means, by the way, meta diversity, it means they're empowering weaker archetypes. They're empowering the entirety of Bilgewater. Like, half the Bilgewater decks are kind of built around these cards, and they're allowing a lot more diversity of Bilgewater. They're allowing diversity of play pattern because they represent very unique play patterns. They create very unique situations, and they do so typically without being conventionally OP. That from a win rate perspective, they are not OP. Does that mean they shouldn't be nerfed? No, because you don't nerf and balance around win rates necessarily. That's one factor that you keep in mind. But most importantly with these cards is that if they were to be nerfed, which I wouldn't disagree with, Bilgewater and maybe some of its specific archetypes should be buffed in other ways, because these cards are kind of keeping a lot afloat. Next is damage and rising tides. Yeah, direct damage, sure. Karma and Ezreal. We shared some thoughts. Yeah. I think Ezreal has actually been like shockingly underwhelming. Ezreal Twisted Fate, by the way, might be the future. Keep your eyes out for that. There's a chance. Who knows? Rules, text clarity makes sense. Personalization, emotes. Okay, emote game. Final importance. So we don't see the animations. Ezreal's high tier. My stance would go, it would go Ezreal, and then Teemo. Oh, this is close. This is tight. I don't like the other two. Elise would be next, and then Draven. Draven's too unironic. Elise is like it's like an anime girl face. It's like the fucking I don't know what it's called, but it's like the stepping on you face, which I'm into. I can get down with that, but it's not. It's kind of like what's the point of that as an emote, right? It's like I like hentai, but I'm not gonna put ASCII hentai in Twitch chat because it just doesn't what's the point? It doesn't make sense. Like the format, why would I? It doesn't make, right? Where I'm into this, but why would I use it as an emote to my opponent in a video game? I just don't get that. Okay, that's it. That's my brief overview. That was wait, how long was that? That was 45 minutes. Shit! I always do this. I always try to keep the meta Mondays brief, and then when I'm done recording, I'm like, man, that was good. And then I look at the time and I'm like, wait, where did the last hour and a half go?